It's wonderful to welcome Geoff Downes back onto the Yes Music podcast. And the first thing I want to say, apart from welcome, Geoff, is that I saw the stream of the brilliant John Wetton tribute concert recently with Bill Bruford and Billy Sherwood and Jay Shellen playing. So many amazing musicians and a fantastic selection of songs from John's life. It must have been a real, well, I suppose some mixed feelings for you doing that day.
Yeah, it was, I think it was a great turnout. And I think that, I was quite nervous because I wanted it obviously to be, something special for John because bearing in mind the close relationship John and I had for many years. But it was just very heartwarming that, people like Steve Hackett and Bill turned out and Rick, just really a great outpouring of respect and love for John, which was really what it was all about. And I think that it turned out really well. It was a great musical experience as well. I know John was really great exponent of working with Paul Green's rock school, who I think been recently out with John Anderson, haven't they? So it was great to have them on board, and the whole thing was really just a great tribute to John. And I think that we had some great response from people and some great reactions. So, that's what it was. That's what it was all about. It was all about John, and I'm very happy that it turned out so well.
Yeah, a fantastic event.
So before we come to your new DBA album, we are currently doing a series on the podcast about Tales from Topographic Oceans. The forthcoming Yes Tour is called the Classic Tales of Yes Tour, and you have played both the Revealing Science of God and Ritual live with Yes. Are those pieces particularly challenging, and would you like to play the rest of the album?
It's an amazing collection of music, and I think that when Steve put it forward and said, look, I'd really like to do some of Tales, this was going back to, I think, 2017, back then. I was not really that familiar with the album because at that point I sort of moved on from Yes and done various other things, and when I was at music college, I was sort of getting more involved in jazz rock and that kind of thing. So I really, it was a little bit of not a missed opportunity, but it was something that I'd not really spent too much attention on. So going into it at a later stage it was quite a musical journey because I realised how brilliant it was, how brilliant they put this album, these four sides of an album together with all these different motifs. It's almost like a collection of classical music. So, looking at the sides that we did with side 1 and side 4, they were like the bookends. And now that we're going to be incorporating some of the sides 2 and 3 in that, it's going to be quite an interesting challenge, certainly for me to be playing those great bits of music. I'm not going to say too much about exactly how we're going to structure it, but certainly there will be, involvement of all the various aspects of Tales. So I think it's a phenomenal album, and from my standpoint, I look at it as a musicology standpoint in that it's very interesting how Yes put stuff like that together, how they interacted with all these different motifs and things coming back. It's just a wonderful collection of music.
Okay, well, I'm very much looking forward to hearing that. Our friends in the US will hear that before we do here in the UK. However, let's go back to the 5th album, Celestial Songs, by the Downes Braid Association. So it's going to be released on the 8th of September, and Mark and I have been lucky enough to listen to a pre-release copy. And we both think it's a fantastic album, and it comes after one of my favourite albums of all time, which was Halcyon Hymns. I love that one. And the new album, though, contains a lot of fantastic songs by you and the remarkable Chris Braid. But prog fans will be particularly pleased about 2 collaborations, which are included with Andy Partridge, who you've worked with before, and Francis Dunnery. How did those 2 songs come about?
Well, I think Chris had been in contact with both Francis and Andy over the years, and I think that when we were not farming it out, but we've had this rhythm section, our actual rhythm section, pretty tight for the last 3 albums, I think, of Ash Sohn and Andy Hodge.
Yeah,
and it's been nice to get other people to come in, such as Mark Almond, and also having the great Dave Bainbridge come in and do stuff for with us on the last two albums. I think that's been, again, it ties us in some respects to the prog world, but at the same time, we're not essentially trying to be a prog duo, because of course Chris's background is very much in the pop zone, but
yeah.
I don't think that we really consider it to be any other than just a great collaboration. We're just happy to put it together like that, and certainly bringing in people that Chris has worked with before has always seemed to be very special for me.
And is Francis Dunnery, obviously starting off with It Bites, is he someone that you've followed? Do you know his work, and have you worked with him yourself?
I've never actually worked with him. I think he played on one of the Asia tracks. I think John Wetton worked with him briefly at some point. So there's always that sort of peripheral connection with people, and I think that I think actually It Bites actually toured in Asia at one point. So there are connections, and I think that it always amazes me how these connections are made. Whether it be through Chris, people he's worked with, and people I've worked with before. It's actually a much smaller pool than people might think looking at it from the outside.
Yes,
absolutely. So Andy Hodge and Dave Bainbridge returned for this album. I suppose by now they know exactly what they need to do for a DBA album?
Yeah, I mean, they're very, very gifted musicians. And I think when Chris and I started out back in 2011, which was when I rejoined Yes, and it was about the same kind of time, we were recording the Fly From Here album. When we started out, it was just a more of an experimental pop duo with the rhythm box and just keyboards and vocals, and I think that's pretty much how we started off. But I think as time went by, we got more and more interested in the idea of expanding it and not trying to create a band as such, but having more of a band sound. And I think that when we got Ash in and Andy Hodge and latterly David, I mean, we had Rick's guitarist Dave Colquhoun on one of the albums, so. It's a bit of a melting pot, when it all comes together. And certainly, Andy's one of those bass players that has an incredible feel and knowledge for music, and that's been a real bonus from my standpoint, because I'm very, having worked with some amazing bass players, like John and Greg Lake and Chris Squire. I'm probably, the top bass players in the prog world I've had the pleasure of working with. So I'm very conscious about, bass guitar, and Andy seems to have that ability to come in and really take it a stage further. The same could be said for Ash. Ash, I met with Trevor when I was doing the producer's album. So, as I said, there's a lot of cross-pollination between all the people who are working on the DBA stuff and the prog world and the pop world. So it's, as I say, it's somewhere in the middle of it all. There's, Chris and I make some music out of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And speaking of iconic pop singers, as you've already mentioned, Mark Armand comes in for a return trip, a little cameo with Chris on The Darker Side of Fame. And that particular song, it's got some pretty powerful lyrics in it. And also another aspect of the album, which is back again, I'm delighted to say, is some poetry. And, I think it all helps a great amount with the mood of the album. So how important do you think the words are on this album, and not just this album, but all DBA albums?
I think that they're very important. I think that certainly Chris has a good way with lyrics. He manages to capture the spirit of the song, or certainly the music, which a lot of the time I give him a load of musical ideas and he sifts through them, and that's really how the material comes together.
Yeah.
But, and I think that imprints in them some aspects of the how the lyrics are going to work out. But certainly, you mentioned Darker Side of Fame. It's very much a case of, I think that, I've experienced it. I think a lot of people have experienced it, who've been at the top and done various things and had successes, that there's another side to it all, and I think that it's not all that it seems from the outside looking in, and I think that in more extreme cases, you've got people like George Michael, who's a very, there's almost a tortured soul in there, as much as the glory of all the success and everything like that. There's this opposite side, the flip side of the coin. So I think it really does resonate well with certainly with a lot of people that when they hear that song, they immediately get what it's about. And the aspect of the album, I think, with the general flow, there's a positivity there. It's not sort of doom and gloom. It's not trying to bring everybody down. We're trying to keep the positive edge as well. And so I think that that's what music is all about. You have the highs and lows, and you have the sadness, you have the tragedy, you have the happiness. It's like any art form, really. That's the way that it. Go to the theatre. You've got tragic comedy. And so I think that the way that we put the album together was, we wanted it as a whole. We didn't want it to be just a collection of songs. So whilst it's not a concept album per se, there is a continuity with the lyrics and the songs. Just really life's reflections.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan of your keyboards, and I'm always like checking out your keyboard gear, things that they show on YouTube. So I'm curious, how do you choose the keyboards and the sounds that you do, or that you select for the parts? There's some really great solo synth sounds and Hammond sounds, for example, on this album.
Hammond organ's always a go-to for me, as is an acoustic piano, because that's really the upbringing that I had, and I think that, if you listen to a lot of the great music in the 70s, that there's a lot of Hammond, there's a lot of piano, and synthesizers started to come through at that point, but the actual root instruments are very much, rock music particularly, were Hammond organ and acoustic piano. So I'm never really ever going to leave those behind. But of course, I've always been fascinated by technology, particularly in the development of keyboard instruments and synthesizers. So I'm always looking for those extra sounds. There's something that's just going to give you a bit of inspiration. And I think a lot of the songs, the ideas that when I put them together and get them off to Chris, they've already got those elements of experimental keyboard sounds, of just noises, things that come to mind, that actually are inherent in the actual creative process of the idea, in its formative stages.
So Chris has said that this album is the last chapter in a series. I hope that doesn't mean that it's the final album from DBA. It's not, is it?
No. I think that we've already started looking at the 6th album. So
good news. Yeah.
So yes, you don't get rid of us that easily. It's a great combination, I think, that we've built up between us. I think that might not be a huge commercial success, but I mean that's not really what we're in the game for. I think what we're after is really just making music that makes us happy. And I think that it does make us happy. We listen to these albums and we feel very proud of them. And I think that maybe Chris thinks that, well, maybe the next album's going to go in a different direction, which it probably may. I think that we don't want to be just making be a parody of ourselves, and so I think possibly the next chapter we'll probably challenge ourselves to come up with something totally different. Maybe 10 3-minute pop songs or one 40-minute piece. I don't know.
Wow.
It could go either way.
Yeah, and there is of course, the last song, Beyond the Stars, and Chris calls it an 11-minute epic. But I did want to ask you just finally, before we have to leave it today, about the artwork, because we've got Roger Dean back again, and I loved the Kingfisher and the green aspect of the previous album cover for DBA, but this one is in some ways even better, isn't it, with its colour and its vibrancy?
It's hard to say what's better with Roger, because he always seems to come up with something that encapsulates the music, and I think that he's very, very conscious about that. He's not one to say, well, there's a sleeve, don't really care what's inside it. I think with Roger, he's very conscious of the fact that what he wants his painting to reflect the mood and the the lyrical content of the songs, the song titles, the whole nature of it. And so I think with this one, it is extra special. I think the sleeve he's come up with this time. I'm a huge fan of. I used to have the Yes logo on my student accommodation wall. Back in whatever. So Roger's been a big part of my life, whether he likes it or not. And I think that when I actually got to meet him around about 1980 for the Drama album,
yes,
it started a long relationship that I've had with him on all the various projects, be it Asia or DBA or and obviously the Latter Day Yes album. So it's a great relationship, and Roger's just an absolute genius. To have someone like that doing your album sleeves is extra special.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure as always to speak to you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you boys again, and hopefully we'll be catching up sometime when we get out there in the autumn.
Yes, indeed. Very good luck with that and with this fantastic DBA album, and we'll speak to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Take care, Geoff.
Thanks a lot.